No one believed the distress signal would be heard. Not out here. Not this far from any charted human space. The colony on Zeta 5 had been under siege for 5 days. The alien attackers, tall insect-like creatures called the Zarn, had landed without warning. No demands, no negotiations, just slaughter. Governor Marin Voss stood in the half-ruined command center, listening to the garbled reports. The colony's defense drones had been wiped out the first day. The militia had been pushed back to the central dome. They were out of ammo, out of power, and soon, out of time. "We have no more orbital coverage," Lieutenant Garin said, wiping blood from his temple. His uniform was scorched, eyes hollow. "The last satellite went dark an hour ago." Marin nodded grimly. Around them, the survivors huddled in makeshift shelters. Children, elderly, farmers and technicians. No soldiers anymore. "We sent the distress call on all bands, boosted to max range," Garin continued. "But this deep in the fringe, no one's listening, and even if they were, no ship could get here fast enough." Marin knew he was right. Zeta 5 was a remote colony, a science outpost that had only recently begun settlement. The nearest human fleet base was months away. Their government had warned them. Fringe colonies were on their own. But still, they'd sent the call, because what else could they do? Then came the sound. At first, Marin thought it was her imagination, a low, pulsing hum, growing louder, deeper. The air trembled. Panels on the ceiling rattled. Garin looked up sharply. "That's not artillery." The hum became a roar. And then the floor shook as something vast passed overhead. People screamed. The children covered their ears. A blinding light flashed through the ruined dome's shattered ceiling. A shape blocked out the stars. Metallic. Massive. "Contact in orbit," someone shouted from the barely working sensor station. "Unknown. No, wait. Human transponder. It's a warship." The room fell silent. Marin's heart pounded. "Repeat that." "It's a human warship," the tech cried, tears streaming down her face. "Heavy cruiser class, call sign resolute." No one moved. No one spoke for a heartbeat. Then the comms crackled. "This is Captain Elias Rourke of the UHS Resolute. We received your distress call. Reinforcements have arrived. Hold on." Marin covered her mouth. People around her broke into sobs. Garin sagged against the wall, disbelief on his face. "They came," he whispered. "I can't believe it. They actually came." Overhead, the roar of engines intensified. Outside the shattered dome, streaks of fire lit the night sky, dropships descending. Then came the thunder. The Resolute's railguns opened fire, slashing the darkness with lances of molten metal. The ground shook with the force of the orbital bombardment. In the distance, Zarn forces scattered, their formations broken apart by precise, brutal strikes. Dropships slammed down near the colony, hatches blowing open. Human Marines poured out, armored, armed, relentless. Marin stumbled to the entrance, watching in awe. A Marine sergeant spotted her. "Governor Voss?" She nodded, her voice shaking. "Captain Rourke sent us. You're safe now. We'll drive them off." As the Marine squad pushed forward, Garin came to stand beside her. "You know what this means," he said quietly. Marin looked at the sky, where the Resolute hung like a steel angel above them. "It means," she whispered, voice filled with something fierce, "they thought no help was coming. But we are human, and we don't leave our own behind." The battle outside raged through the night. From the shattered edges of the colony's central dome, Marin watched the firefight unfold. Bright streaks of railgun rounds tore across the sky. Dropship-mounted cannons hammered the advancing Zarn, forcing them into retreat. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of burning metal. Human Marines moved like a practiced machine, teams covering each other, pushing forward in tight formation. Their armor gleamed silver under the glow of distant fires. It was overwhelming. Marin hadn't realized just how brutal and efficient the Resolute soldiers were. These weren't colony militia. These were war-hardened troops, trained to fight in the worst of conditions. Beside her, Garen shook his head in wonder. I never thought I'd see the day. A heavy cruiser, this far out. Neither did I, Marin whispered. They must have pushed her engines to the limit to get here in time. A voice crackled over her portable comms unit. Governor Voss, this is Captain Rourke. Status on your civilian population? She keyed the communication. We're holding, Captain. Your Marines are making the difference. How did you get here so fast? There was a pause. Then Rourke's deep voice replied. We weren't supposed to be anywhere near this sector. We picked up your distress call by chance while running a recon sweep for pirate activity. When we heard what was happening, I overrode orders. Marin's breath caught. You disobeyed fleet command. A hint of dry humor touched Rourke's tone. They can court-martial me later. Right now, we're saving lives. A burst of static interrupted them. On the horizon, a massive Zarn carrier creature, a living engine of war, rose from the tree line, surrounded by swarms of smaller units. Its chitinous body gleamed in the moonlight. The Marines opened fire, but the creature's thick armor deflected most rounds. Marin's heart sank. Captain, that carrier is moving on the colony. We can't stop it. Rourke's voice came through, calm and controlled. Understood. Targeting now. All ground units, clear the impact zone. Fire mission inbound. Up in orbit, the Resolute's main guns swiveled. Deep in the belly of the cruiser, a massive projectile was loaded, dense alloy, guided by advanced targeting AI. A moment later, the entire colony felt a tremor as the weapon fired. A streak of light tore through the sky, faster than sound. It struck the Zarn carrier dead center. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then, an explosion so violent it flattened the surrounding trees, sending a shock wave through the earth. Zarn bodies were vaporized. The carrier was gone, a molten crater in its place. The remaining Zarn forces began to break. Without their carrier, their command structure collapsed. The human Marines pressed the advantage, driving them back kilometer by kilometer. Marin finally slumped against a wall, exhaustion crashing down on her. We might actually survive this, she whispered. Garen sat beside her, wiping soot from his face. Because they came. Because someone cared enough to come. Before Marin could respond, the comms crackled again. Governor, this is Rourke. I'm coming planetside. We'll need to meet soon. There's something you need to know about these Zarn attacks. Her pulse quickened. Acknowledged, Captain. We'll be ready. She glanced at Garen. He raised an eyebrow. What do you think that means? Marin shook her head, worry creeping back in. I don't know. But something tells me this wasn't just a random raid. And this fight isn't over yet. Above them, the Resolute kept watch, a lone guardian in the void, proof that humanity, when it chose to, could be fierce, loyal, and terrifyingly effective. Dawn broke over a scarred landscape. The fields outside the colony dome were pitted with craters and blackened wreckage. Smoke still drifted from shattered outbuildings. The air smelled of scorched earth and ozone. But the Zarn were gone. Their scattered remnants had retreated into the deep forests beyond sensor range. The Marines were sweeping the area in teams, confirming the withdrawal. Marin barely had time to process it all before the dropship arrived. It touched down just outside the dome, engines hissing as they cooled. The boarding ramp lowered with a metallic clang. A tall man in a dark combat uniform strode down the ramp, Captain Elias Rourke himself. His face was weathered, eyes sharp beneath a close-cropped beard. A heavy pistol rested at his side, though he moved with the ease of someone used to command, not constant battle. Marin met him at the edge of the dome, Garen at her side. "Captain Rourke," she greeted, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "You saved us." There aren't words." Rourke shook her hand firmly. "You don't need words, Governor. You held out longer than most colonies would have, but I'm afraid the job's not done yet." He motioned toward the dropship. "We need to talk, in private." Marin exchanged a glance with Garen, then nodded. Together, they followed Rourke aboard. The hatch sealed behind them with a hiss, shutting out the ruined world outside. Inside, the briefing room was stark, but functional. A large display flickered to life, showing a rotating hologram of a Zarn ship, sleek, organic-looking, bristling with weapon pods. Rourke leaned against the table, arms crossed. His voice was low, serious. "This wasn't a random Zarn strike," he said. "We've seen patterns, raids targeting fringe colonies, small research outposts, places far from the main fleet routes." Marin frowned. "We're scientists, farmers. There's nothing of value here." Rourke shook his head. "It's not about what you have. It's about where you are." Zeta 5 sits on the edge of what used to be uncharted space. We recently detected strange energy signatures nearby, possible Zarn staging points. He tapped a control, shifting the display to show a star map. Red markers flared around Zeta 5 and several nearby systems. "They're probing, testing our response times, and judging from what we just saw, they didn't expect us to get here fast enough." Garen swore under his breath. "You're saying this was a scouting force?" Rourke nodded grimly. "A large one, but yes. The main Zarn fleets haven't moved yet, but they will. Soon." Marin's throat tightened. "How long do we have?" Rourke's gaze was hard. "Not long, which is why I need your help. The Resolute is the only heavy warship in this sector right now. We can't defend every colony alone." He paused, studying them both. "I need local knowledge, places the Zarn might use for staging, hidden routes through this sector, and—" his voice lowered. "We need to get your people off-world. If the main fleet comes, this colony won't stand." Silence fell over the room. Marin's mind raced. Evacuate. Leave everything behind. The homes they'd built, the lives they'd carved from this wild world. But what choice was there? Finally, she met Rourke's eyes. "I'll help. Whatever you need. Just promise me. Promise us that humanity won't abandon this fight." Rourke's expression softened for the first time. "Governor, we heard your call. Against orders, across light years. We came because humans don't leave their own to die." He straightened. "That's a promise." Before Marin could reply, an urgent signal crackled over the dropship's comm. "Captain, long-range sensors just picked up multiple Zarn signatures entering the system. Big ones. They're coming back." Rourke's eyes narrowed. "So it begins." He turned to Marin and Garen. "Get your people ready. The next fight won't be like the last one." Marin swallowed hard. There was no time for fear now, only resolve. "We'll be ready," she said, "because no matter what came next, Zeta 5 would not fall without a fight." The colony moved like a hive disturbed. Word of the incoming Zarn fleet spread fast. Within an hour, the central dome was filled with activity. Civilians packed emergency supplies. Families gathered at rally points, children clutching hastily packed bags. The wounded were moved to portable medpods, ready to be loaded onto evac shuttles. Above, the Resolute maintained orbit, sensors sweeping the void. Dropships ferried supplies and additional Marines down to reinforce the colony's defenses, temporary as they might be. Marin strode through the chaos with Garen at her side, exhaustion pushed aside by adrenaline. "We've got less than 4 hours," Garen said grimly, reading updates from his datapad. "Their advance elements will be in orbit by then." Marin nodded. "How are the evac preps?" "Better than expected. Rourke's crew is helping coordinate, but there's not enough lift capacity to get everyone off at once." She grimaced. That meant some would have to stay behind to buy time. She didn't ask who. She already knew the answer. Herself, Garen, the remaining militia, and likely Rourke's Marines. A voice called out, "Governor!" Marin turned as Captain Rourke approached, helmet tucked under one arm. His face was tight, jaw set. "We've confirmed it," he said without preamble. "Zarn battle group, 3 heavy warships, multiple escorts, estimated landing force, several thousand." Garen cursed softly. Marin forced herself to stay calm. "Can we fight them off?" Rourke's expression said everything. "No," he said flatly. "Not with what we have here. The Resolute can engage in orbit, but if they break through and land a full force, the colony will be overrun." He hesitated, then added, "Fleet Command received my unauthorized jump. They're dispatching reinforcements, but their day's out." "Too late." "So we hold," Marin said quietly. "We fight to buy time for evacuation." Rourke gave a grim nod. "Exactly." An alarm blared through the colony, long-range sensors detecting the Zarn fleet's deceleration burn. They were close now. Rourke clapped a hand on Marin's shoulder. "You've already done more than most governors I've met. Just stay alive a little longer." He turned to leave, but Marin called after him. "Captain, if this is a losing battle, why stay?" Rourke paused. For a moment something flickered in his eyes. "Because," he said softly, "they think we'll run. That will break, but they don't understand humans. Not yet." And with that, he was gone. The hours that followed blurred into frantic preparation. Makeshift barricades went up. Engineers rigged power cells to jury-rig defensive turrets. Marines worked alongside colonists, fortifying the central dome. Children were loaded onto the first wave of evac shuttles, along with the elderly and injured. Marin watched them go, heart breaking, but resolute. "We stay," she told Garen, as the last of the first wave lifted off, "until the last shuttle is away." He nodded without hesitation. Above, the Resolute maneuvered into a high orbit, her guns charged, shields at full strength. Alone against a fleet. The countdown reached its final minutes, and then, on the edge of the colony's battered sensor grid, red icons bloomed. The Zarn fleet had arrived. The first strike came from orbit. High above Zeta 5, the Zarn warships opened fire, pulsing beams of violet energy lancing toward the Resolute. Captain Rourke stood on the bridge, voice calm over the rising tension. "Shields holding. Return fire. All batteries. Full spread." The Resolute answered with a fury of its own. Railgun slugs and missile barrages lit up the darkness. The human warship was outnumbered 3-1, but Rourke wasn't giving an inch. On the ground, the colonists and Marines felt the distant thunder of the orbital battle. The sky flickered with flashes of weapons fire. Marin stood on the barricade line, watching. Her pulse hammered, but her hands were steady on the rifle Rourke's Marines had given her. Garen crouched beside her, scanning the tree line beyond the outer perimeter. "They'll send landers soon," he said, "once they realize they can't break Resolute quickly." Marin nodded grimly. "And we'll be waiting." Minutes later, alarms screamed again, multiple Zarn landing craft inbound. Rourke's voice came over the comms. "Ground teams, enemy drop pods incoming. Prepare for contact. Hold the line." Streaks of fire appeared in the dawn sky. Zarn drop pods punching through the atmosphere, too fast for most defenses to intercept. They slammed into the earth beyond the colony walls, kicking up clouds of dirt and ash. Pods burst open, disgorging waves of insectoid warriors, taller than a man, armored in gleaming chitin, moving with terrifying speed. Marin's breath caught. They were bigger than she'd imagined. The Marines opened fire with disciplined bursts. Rail rifles snapped, mowing down the first wave. Colonists manned the jury-rigged turrets, cutting swaths through the attackers. Explosives planted along approach routes detonated, sending Zarn bodies flying. But still they came. The outer barricades were soon swarming with clawed limbs and shrieking alien voices. Maren fired until her shoulders ached, forcing herself to stay calm. A Zarn warrior leapt the barricade near her, only to be blasted back by Garen's sidearm. "Stay sharp," he shouted. "They're flanking left." More pods hit behind the colony's northern ridge, an attempt to encircle. Rourke's voice crackled through the comms. "Holding in orbit, but can't provide ground support. Too many enemy ships. You're on your own for now." Maren gritted her teeth. "Understood. We'll hold." The fighting grew desperate. Every street, every barricade became a battleground. Marines fought with grim determination, moving in coordinated squads. Colonists who'd never fired a weapon before now fought beside them, because there was no other choice. By mid-morning, parts of the outer dome had fallen. The defenders pulled back to the central plaza, last stand territory. Maren found herself next to Rourke's XO, Commander Hale, a grizzled veteran with a nasty facial scar. "You fight well for a scientist," he told her between volleys. She gave a humorless smile. "Desperation is a good teacher." Hale glanced at the sky. "We just need a few more hours. Reinforcements are coming, but we have to survive until then." Another wave of Zarn charged, and again the defenders met them with gunfire and grit. Bodies piled high. Ammo ran low. The air stank of blood and burnt flesh. Maren reloaded with shaking fingers. Around her, exhausted faces stared back, yet not one had broken. Because no one here believed in surrender. Not anymore. Not when they knew. Someone had come for them once already. And that meant hope was still alive. The central plaza was chaos. Smoke choked the air. The wounded lay wherever there was space, tended by medics who worked with bloody hands and dwindling supplies. But the defenders still held, barely. Maren crouched behind a shattered support pillar, rifle across her knees. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow, but she barely felt it. Garen knelt nearby, face grim. "We're almost out of ammunition." She nodded. She knew. Everyone knew. Rourke's voice came through the comms, distorted by interference. "Resolute still holding. Enemy forces increasing ground pressure. Governor. Status." Maren keyed the comm with shaking fingers. "Barely holding, Captain. Casualties mounting. If you have any help to send." Rourke's reply was immediate, tight with frustration. "Pulling everything I can. Expect a drop team soon. Just hold, reinforcements are almost here." A flicker of hope, thin, but enough. Then the next wave came. Hundreds of Zarn stormed the plaza, chittering and screeching. They surged over barricades, through gaps blasted in the colony's defenses. Hand-to-hand fighting erupted. Maren shot one Zarn warrior at point blank, then swung the rifle like a club as another lunged. Garen tackled it, blade flashing. Everywhere, humans fought with whatever they had. Blades, sidearms, even improvised weapons. Commander Hale led a squad of Marines in a desperate countercharge, retaking part of the plaza with sheer grit. But it wasn't enough. More Zarn drop pods punched through the sky, landing closer this time. Rourke's voice came again. Urgent. "Governor, multiple friendly ships entering system. Fleet reinforcements arriving." A cry of exhausted joy rose from the defenders. Maren looked to the heavens, just as new shapes streaked through the upper atmosphere. Human destroyers and frigates, small fast, but enough to tilt the balance. Above, the Resolute surged forward, joined by the newcomers. Together they hammered the Zarn fleet with renewed fury. Dropships broke through and streaked toward the colony. Maren's comm crackled. "Ground teams. This is Captain Rourke. Hold fast. Friendly drop squads inbound. We're not leaving anyone behind." Minutes later, human gunships screamed in over the plaza. Heavy weapons roared, autocannons mowing down Zarn in swaths. Marines in fresh armor stormed down ramps, joining the fight with brutal efficiency. The tide turned. Zarn forces faltered. caught between reinforced human lines and the withering fire from above. Marin collapsed behind cover, body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. Garen dropped beside her, grinning through blood-smeared lips. "Told you we just had to hold." She managed a weak laugh. "I'm starting to believe it." Then Captain Rourke himself landed with the lead drop team, striding through the smoke like a man possessed. He grabbed a comm unit. "All ground forces, push forward, drive them out." And the battered, bloodied defenders obeyed, because hope had become more than a word. It was here. It was real. And humans did not break. The counterattack was relentless. The combined force of Marines, fresh from the fleet's reinforcements, swept through the colony streets. Where just hours ago the Zarn had overwhelmed barricades, now they were being driven back, hard. Gunships strafed retreating clusters of warriors. Heavy infantry advanced in coordinated lines, flushing the aliens from buildings and tunnels. In the central plaza, Marin stood again, rifle slung across her back, limbs shaking with exhaustion, but unwilling to stop. Garen was beside her, bloodied but grinning through split lips. Around them, the wounded were being evacuated. The second wave of evac shuttles was nearly full. Captain Rourke found them in the plaza, armor scorched, helmet under one arm. His expression was steel. "You did it," he said simply. "You held." Marin shook her head. "We didn't do it alone." Rourke gave the barest of smiles. "You didn't break. That's why we came." A Marine runner approached, saluting. "Sir, enemy forces are retreating from the sector. The fleet is mopping up the last Zarn ships. We hold the system." Rourke exhaled slowly, tension finally easing from his frame. "Good. Begin full evacuation. This colony's too exposed now. They'll try again, with more." Marin's heart twisted at that, but she nodded. "We'll do whatever it takes." Rourke glanced at her, voice quieter. "You have my word. Fleet Command knows now. They've seen what's out here. Reinforcements will follow. The fringe won't be left unprotected again." Marin's throat tightened, but this time with relief. It was over, for now. 3 days later, the battered survivors of Zeta 5 stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, watching their world shrink below them as the cruiser pulled away from orbit. The colony was scarred, burning, but they were alive. Rourke stood beside Marin as the stars wheeled past the viewport. "You asked me once why we stayed," he said quietly. She looked at him, exhausted, but alive. "Yes." He nodded towards the viewport, at the survivors gathered below. "For them, because as long as one human calls for help, we answer." He turned, gaze hard. The Zarn thought no help would come. They thought humanity would fracture and forget the fringe worlds. He smiled then, grim and full of steel. But now they know. Marin held his gaze. "Yes," she said softly. "Now they know." And across the stars, word spread, of Zeta 5, of a lone warship that answered the call, of colonists who refused to break. And the Zarn, for the first time, would learn fear. Because when humanity chooses to fight, no one fights harder. And no one gets left behind.